Hey, I'm Matt Hudgens, and he's Dave Mulvaney, and this is Profitability MD. Dave, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, Matt. How about you?
I am doing great. We're almost we got a lot of rain here in the south, both probably down there in Jacksonville and here in Atlanta, and all of a sudden it's over this afternoon, and it's very cool, almost like this is the real start of the fall. What's it like down there?
I think it was 100 today, so.
Okay, never mind. That's great. All right, episode 144, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. So imposter syndrome shows itself in your business and in your personal beliefs, many different ways and many different avenues, right? And so it's funny, I've had a couple of those conversations recently in the last couple of days, but we do see it all the time with business owners and professionals in general, where you feel like an imposter. Oh my gosh, they're going to find me out.
You know, like for instance, doctors, you know, they get out of college, they've studied all this time, and then they go through this internship, and then like they might practice for like 5 years, and they're still going, I hope nobody figures out that I have no idea what I'm doing. That's imposter syndrome. It happens in almost every type of
almost every type of business and industry. It's funny you mention that, right? So medical in general, very specific. There's a lot of research that says, so you want the old-timey doctors if he's a specialist, right? But you want the younger doctor if it's something new technology that a lot of the older doctors aren't up to speed, whereas the newer doctors, and whatever term that is that not your first year out of school, maybe your third to fifth year out of school, you have more recent research or more up to date on the latest and greatest techniques or strategies. And so you might feel like an imposter, but you probably know more than the old timer because you know the new tech and the new ways. So
well, I'll give an example of imposter syndrome in my life so we can really get down. So in about 2004, I think we talked about it on the show before. I took some copywriting coaching back then through a guy named Clayton Makepeace, who's now passed away, but and Dan Kennedy. And so I wrote this lead magnet, and it brought in all this business. It brought in arguably close to $100 million over a 10-year period of time in my business. Here I am years later, I go and get coaching from Ray Edwards' organization and become one of their certified copywriters. And now I'm a certified copywriting coach. And to this day, I still don't feel qualified as a copywriter. I've had enormous training and I've generated hundreds, in excess of $100 million with copy that I've written. And at the same time, I still don't feel that. I'm like, what if somebody figures out I don't know what I'm doing as a copywriter? So that's imposter syndrome. No matter how much experience you have, there's always this level of doubt, and it's self-doubt. This is mindset stuff, really.
Yeah, it really is. Well, it's funny you said I have two examples on top of that you were just talking about, where one of my guys was talking to him, I think it was yesterday via text, and he was actually saying those exact words. I want to become an expert. I want to make sure I'm an expert before I do any of this. I want to be an expert before. And same thing that you will say to yourself to boost, or what I actually told him. So, but what's the definition of an expert? An expert is just somebody who knows more than the average person, right? So my point, my text back to him was, you already are an expert, right? So an expert in copywriting, you've had 2 sets of training for copywriting. By definition, you are an expert because you have more copyright experience than me, right? I'm the average person, right? My guy I was talking to via text, he's an expert in areas because he knows more than the average consumer, right? You just got to own up. An expert doesn't have to know all the questions. An expert has to know more than the average person.
So right? to overcome because we're talking, the show is overcoming imposter syndrome. So one of the things I started to do to overcome imposter syndrome is I decided to triple my fees that I charge. That was the first thing I did. I said, I'm going to start charging 3 times as much. That way the clients that I do get won't, they'll be worthwhile, and I'll work harder to make sure that we have success. So one of the things I started to do was elevate my belief in myself and said, I'm going to charge more for what I do. And I just quoted an unbelievable fee today that I couldn't, a year ago, I would have never pictured myself quoting a fee, a six-figure fee and they didn't flinch. So that's a great sign. But it took, that was my way of overcoming imposter syndrome, because I know if I bring on the client that they'll get results. That's the other side of it, is now knowing if I bring in this big fee, I'm not going to poke at this. I'm going to get it right.
You're going to give it your all. Yes.
So you kind of, to overcome these feelings of doubt, we all have them. It's really a mindset to say, I'm going to focus on, like, if you want to be a sharpshooter, well, to overcome like your fear of not being good enough, what do you have to do? You have to constantly be shooting at a target, I would imagine. I'm not a sharpshooter or anything like that, but in order to improve, you're going to constantly have to prove, to be shooting. And so constantly. But the other part of overcoming imposter syndrome, I think, is knowing that almost inevitably there's always someone better than you. And that's okay.
And that's okay. You said 3 or 4 things right there, right? So I'm a big golf nut. I know you like to golf too. And so Phil Mickelson talks about the imposter syndrome. So, he's been a very good putter through his career, and he's been a bad putter at times, right? And so when he was going through rough times, he had this little drill where he'll putt 100 4-footers in a row. He goes around the circle and he doesn't stop till he makes 100 in a row. That's the repetition. That's the building the confidence. That's getting over the imposter syndrome, knowing that, hey, I've done this 100 times, literally, before the round practice or last night after the round, that I know I've done this 100 times, literally. This is no big deal. So you get expertise by building up your skill set. I'm working with a company right now that's in dental training. Okay, so they do dental training, continuing education. There's research. So the average dentist, when they get out of dental school, has only done 4 crowns. Okay, maybe 5. I forget. 4 crowns. How can you be an expert at crowns? You've only done 4 your entire 4 years of dental school. There's this group of research that says you don't really get any good until you've done 200, right? So are you going to go 200 on patients, or are you going to go 200 on a simulator? This company does the simulator version. It says, hey, Dave, why don't you go ahead and do your 200s on the simulator? Wow. Now you've got the repetition, because then your failure rate of your crown, when you're not very good, it's a 50-50 chance you're going to mess it up. Once you get over that magic number, it's kind of like that 10,000 hour thing of Malcolm Gladwell. You become an expert once you've done 10,000 hours of a certain subject. There's actual medical research on dentistry. When you've done a procedure 200 times, your failure rate goes way down, 3%, 2%, 1% after you've been the repetition. It's almost like a cliff. So how do you get over imposter syndrome? You get your reps in. You mentioned being a sharpshooter, get your reps in. You mentioned being a free throw shooter, get your reps in. That's one of the ways to get through the imposter syndrome, is work hard. Know you can do it. Have successful results, right? Practice.
Information that Shaq maybe could have used when he was a free throw shooter.
He was just stubborn. He just
didn't care about. But at the same time, commercial pilots. In order to get your commercial pilot license, you mentioned 10,000 hours. That's the first prerequisite. You got to have 10,000 hours before you're elevated to commercial pilot status. So now you're just beginning your career. And now think about that on a simulator. What's that movie where the guy landed in the Hudson River? Miracle on the Hudson.
Yes.
They talked when he was in the courtroom. All of these people, they finally landed the simulator properly, and then his question.
Sully. That's the guy's name.
Yeah.
Sully, Captain Sully.
He said, "Well, how many times did you crash before you landed that properly?" And they said, it was like 19 times.
Yeah.
He said, "I only got one chance. I only had one chance." And so, but that's the thing, that one chance, it's your business. You may be going after this big client or whatever, and you only got one chance. The practice, if you're in sales, the quoting the big fee, if you're or you're trying to land that $100 million client for your financial business, and that, you know, that's a life-changing client. Well, you better have all of your ducks in a row. That means you've done it and practiced it so many times that the imposter syndrome may still be there, but like Phil Mickelson, it's subconscious. The 4-footer should be subconscious. And that's what you need. And even when it's subconscious, you watch those pros, they still miss 4-foot putts on occasion.
But they still miss them. And that's what I think Jack Nicklaus is famous for. He said, I never remember a putt that I missed. I go back that night and remember that I made it.
Well, that's cool.
So isn't that kind of cool? So I think I remember it's him or some version of that, which is okay to lie to yourself. I go home and remember that I made that 4-foot putt. So I never have any bad memories in the memory banks.
It's funny, Lee Trevino, on the same subject, to keep it fun, Lee Trevino said, I've never hit a bad shot. It's the course, it's the wind, it's the rain, but I've never hit a bad shot.
There you go. That's a great way to go through life. Much better than I suck and every shot I hit is terrible, right? It's okay to lie to yourself. He'll have better results saying that he never hit a bad shot than he would every shot I hit is terrible, right? You would just have better results, right? They talk about that. Tony Robbins talks about that. You know, you can have a good attitude or a bad attitude. It doesn't guarantee you to have good results having the good attitude, but it sure as heck give you a better chance than if you have a bad attitude, right?
I used to have this salesperson who worked for our electrical company. And whenever he didn't get a sale, he'd always say, those guys are assholes. He always blamed it on
yeah.
So it was similar, but it was funny because I'd laugh every time he said it, because I'm like, well, it can't always be them. And he goes, it's always them.
He's protecting his ego. That's okay. So another way to overcome the imposter syndrome. So one is to practice. The other is to do. You know, Nike, just do it. Nike, just do it. The conversation that we were having with my guy the other night, and I need to become an expert. And I'm like, you already are an expert. You just need to go do it. You just need to go do it. You just need to get out there. I'm doing something right now, and we were talking offline, and I'm trying something new, and I'm just doing it. Now I'm having good results, and I'm getting better at it, but I'm just doing it, right? So for me, a lot of times overcoming the imposter syndrome is I don't like to practice 100 or 1,000 times. I did a webinar Monday on taxes and retirement, okay? I got this presentation. Some guys would go practice, 4, 5, 6 hours. That's not me. I did it one time. I don't even think I really did. I kind of skimmed through it one time, and then I just go. But that's how I learn. That's how I overcome imposter syndrome, is I just do it. It's better for me because I can second guess myself forever, right? I could spend hours and hours practicing a presentation, and I'll always think it's not good enough. It's not good enough, right? And I'll always so for me, it's better just practice it once, 2, 3 times, and then we just got to go. We just got to do it. For me, I'm doing some client reviews. It's better just to try these new things and make adjustments on the fly. That's the way I do it. So there's no right or wrong, but practice, make 101-foot putts, or just do it. We're going to switch the putter instead of I'm going to go left-hand low on all my 4-footers. Let's just do this thing.
Well, and that's again, this is a mindset, and we can go back to Napoleon Hill. I believe it was the first chapter of Think and Grow Rich, where he's talking about overcoming fear, and his statement is action cures fear. Imposter syndrome is based in a fear that I'm not good enough. I'm not experienced enough. I'm not this. So there's a fear in it. And so, like you said, Napoleon Hill, that's a straight characteristic, straight out of that book. Action cures fear. So when you're facing imposter syndrome, do the thing that you're afraid of. The thing that's making you feel like the imposter, do it. Because first of all, as you start doing it, you're like, well, maybe this ain't so bad.
Right.
And maybe you look like you know what you're doing, but maybe you'll fail and you'll learn from the failure. Oh, that's how I'm supposed to do it too. That's okay to fail.
Oh, it's totally, that's what I mean by the fail fast. We hear that term all the time. I'm watching a show right now called Billions. I think it's a Showtime. It's about a hedge fund and a U.S. attorney's office. And they're always fighting against each other. The U.S. attorney says, oh, he's a cheater. And the hedge fund manager is, no, I'm not a cheater, but maybe he is. But anyway, a lot of those guys have imposter syndromes, right? These guys are famous traders in the show, and they've got imposter syndrome. The U.S. attorney is always afraid of failing and looking bad, so he's worried about the imposter syndrome. He's going to get the better of me again, right? So even these people that are supposed to be at the pinnacle of their, I know it's a fictional TV show, but within fiction, there's truth, right? Here's people at the pinnacle of their professions, and they still have self-doubt. They still have imposter syndrome. They still have, I can lose it all tomorrow. I can, U.S. attorney, and I can be the hedge fund manager guru and, boom, lose it all. So there's this imposter syndrome. Now, what they're doing is they're using that imposter syndrome, that fear, as a driver, as a force. Instead of quitting and shutting down, they're taking action.
Yeah.
They're taking the risk. They're doing something. Not always good, right? That's why the drama of the TV show, right? They're not always doing the right, good things, but they're doing things, is my point. They don't just sit there and say, oh, I suck and I'll never get any better and I'm just going to shut down my fund. Hey, I'm just going to retire as a U.S. District attorney because I'm no good, right? They are taking action.
That's it. And I think, see, in business, I don't care what type of business you're in, business is a series of continually taking risks. If you're not taking risks in business, and I don't mean necessarily giant risks, it's calculated risk, because if you're going to grow your business, well, I'm going to have to spend money on this marketing, or I'm going to have to spend money with this business coach. And that risk, you and I talked about this, you just hired a business coach. And I said, right, what's the worst that could happen? You could spend the fee and learn something and lose the fee, but no matter what, you're going to learn something and make money. We have a different philosophy today than we did back then, because my kids, I always had this expression, it's just money, because once you learn that part of making money is actually losing money.
That's pretty good.
To make money, you have to lose money at some points, because that means, oh, I put this at risk and it didn't come out. So maybe I ought to do a little more research the next time. But you want to talk about imposter syndrome. I'm entering this world of syndicated real estate. We've talked about this, and I've been in real estate for 29 years. And now I'm entering this bigger world where I want to buy apartment complexes and and maybe even mini storage. And so I feel like an imposter, but what am I doing? Number one, I'm taking action. Yep. Number two, I'm studying everything I can find on the subject of syndication. And and I'm out there, I'm going to put myself out there, and I may fall on my face. I may miss a couple of deals because I can't put the deal together, but I'm going to get out there and I'm going to take action. Just like you said, take action on whatever it is I'm doing. I'll practice a little, but I'm going to actually take action and start looking to acquire some bigger properties. And so
it's funny you say that. Yeah, I love that. One of the things you just reminded me, so you're saying in your family, you got to, lose money to make money, or however you said that. So P90X, Tony Horton, P90X was one of those online courses or whatever like that. He's still around, by the way. Now I think he's 61, 62 years old. He still looks great. He's freaking awesome. He had a saying that was, do your best, forget the rest. Do your best, forget the rest. So that's been a constant theme in our house for years, which I will tell my girls, whether it be a sports, whether it be a school activity, whether it be going through rush and sororities, right? Do your best, forget the rest, which goes into that same concept. And I literally just, one of my daughters had an accounting test on Monday. There's my text. I love you. Do your best, forget the rest, right? And then what happens after the test, or after, this is where we get into learning from your mistakes or learning from your successes. It would be what worked. Go back to that. My daughter took the accounting test. I don't know what she made yet, but just let's say she made a great grade. The positives. What did she learn? How did I study? How many hours did I study? What method did I use? Flashcards? Do I review notes? Do I rewrite my notes? Whatever that was. Now she's got a formula to be successful at the next accounting test, right? Do your best, forget the rest, and learn from it, right? What if she didn't do well? We would say, well, what worked? What didn't work? What can we do to improve your chances of making a better grade next time? Do we need a tutor? Do we need more hours? Do we need flashcards? Do you need to rewrite your notes? People learn different ways, different styles. But my point is, she would come up with her own success manual. Either way, she did great. we would have a success manual, do this again. She did poorly, do this again. They talk about this in sports all the time. You got to learn to win. You got to learn to be a winner. You have these athletes that come out of college as great athletes, and they have an adjustment period in pros. Very rarely do they become out as an expert as a pro, right? They got to learn to win. They learn to win as a teenager. They learn to win in college. They learn to win as a pro. I think it's Netflix has a documentary on Michael Schumacher. He's a Formula One racer. All right, I started watching that last night. I'm only about halfway done. He was a great go-kart racer as a teenager. Then he started racing like sports cars in his early 20s. And then by luck and happenstance, I think he was 23, 24, he got into a Formula One car halfway through the year and finished 7th place, which is like unheard of for a Formula One rookie. Most of the time, your peaks are somewhere between 27 to 32 for a Formula One racer. But he had to learn to be successful. He had to learn to do it. He had to be very methodical and practice and have the confidence, because you can't tell me you're getting into a Formula One race car that goes 200 miles an hour and you don't have a little bit of imposter syndrome, right?
Well, it's funny you say that, but what's under all that? My son had this karate teacher. His name is Master Pack. Pack's Academy. He's trained. I mean, Master Pack's probably 80 years old now. Still at a studio every day training kids. But what he used to say is, anybody can win. When you learn how to lose, you'll learn how to win. Because, really, it's in failure, like you just said. Well, he came in 7th. Okay, so that wasn't winning. It might have looked winning on the surface. He still lost. He was the 6th loser technically.
Yeah, it took him 1 year before he won his first race. 1 year of Formula One professional racing before he won.
But learning to lose means being willing to fall on your face. But you said it a bunch of times. Do. It starts with doing. There is no try. There's only do. That's Yoda. Right. In that statement is so much you've got to do, and the only way you can't win when you're doing is when you fall, you don't get up one more time. You just keep getting up, and you keep your eye on the prize. The imposter syndrome will not go away until you've won, typically a few times.
That's a great point. So I'll go back to my Billions show. I'm watching that right now. Again, I told you we're binging on that. Part of it can also show you can learn by practicing, right? You could learn by doing. Hey, just do it, right? One of the ones on there was, I think it was on the episodes I just watched in season 3, and it was U.S. Attorney. What's the worst case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? And instead of being scared of that, let's write it all out and figure out, am I going to be okay if the worst case scenario happens? Or how could I overcome it if the worst case scenario comes to pass? And as a matter of fact, he ended up using it as a way to catch the criminal. The worst case scenario happens, and then I know that's going to happen because I know it's going to happen. I can be there waiting and setting the trap. So go back to business. What's the worst that can happen? You've got a new sales pitch. You're going to a big client, a new big prospect. Worst that's going to happen is he's going to tell me, heck no, get out of my face, get out of the office, right? There's your worst case scenario. Number 1, you could be, now you're ready for it, prepared for it. Maybe number 2, you actually have a comeback for it. Hey, most people would tell me to get the heck out of their office and come back another day. But Mr. Smith, let me tell you why that's not the case with me, right? So you might actually say, worst case scenario comes to fruition. How can I overcome it? And usually it's not the point of all that is usually not as bad as a lot of times the fear is worse than the actual worst case scenario.
The fear of not knowing is one of those things or the fear of, I think the fear of failure is a real, there's a lot, it's all based in fear though. And of course the doing is what makes the fear go away. And so, but it's also repetition, like you said earlier, like Phil Mickelson, free throw shooters. But in business, now, one of the things that I like to do with repetition is I write a lot because I'm a copywriter, but in that writing is when I really clarify the message that I'm trying to deliver. And especially if it's a sales message, when it comes time to sell, I've got it because I've written it so in depth that
Yes,
I
yes.
know what the best points are. And if I'm talking to my audience, we always talk about your target audience. I know what points they're looking for because I wrote it to them. And so, but it's still the imposter syndrome is always going to be there, no matter what you do. And
Always going to be there, no matter how successful. And that's part of what all these athletes talk about. There's always nervous on the first tee, right? We got the Ryder Cup coming up for golf. These professional golfers who have been in the Ryder Cup still talk about how you're nervous on the first tee. And that's good. Remember, this was like a Tony Robbins story. And I think I've told this before in a past episode where Tony Robbins says, I've got two entertainers and they're both seasoned professionals. And the first entertainer says, Tony, I need your help. I got stage fright. Well, tell me how that feels, Tony says. And the entertainer goes, gosh, every time right before I go on stage, my palm sweats. I get sweats on my forehead, my tummy's churning up and down, and I think, oh my goodness, I got stage fright. I can't do this. The opposite, he goes over here and he's got, I think it was actually Bruce Springsteen, the other case, which like, Bruce Springsteen, how do you do it? How do you overcome stage fright? And what do you do? And he says, oh, how do I know that when I'm really ready to go? Tony says, yeah, how do you know you're really ready to go? He says, right before I get on stage, my palms are sweaty, my foreheads are sweaty, my tummy is churning. And I think, yes, I'm ready to go. So you have two entertainers experiencing the same event or the same feelings. One is like, oh my gosh, that's the imposter syndrome, the stage fright. And you got Bruce Springsteen saying, that's when I know it's time to go. And that's what the golfers talk about, the Ryder Cup, the first tee, I got my tummy turned. Now I know Ryder Cup has started, right? The last 9 holes of any golf, they say the last 9 holes of the Masters, the most exciting golf in sports, right? That's when you get nervous, the last 9 holes. Now I know it's time. Now I know it's time to step up. So a lot of these guys talk about when you're nervous, that's when you're supposed to take action. That's when you know the game started. So I'm trying to bring it full circle. And really, we're talking about the imposter syndrome. And there are ways to overcome it, right? First of all, imposter syndrome happens to everybody. Athletes, business owners, tycoons, anybody and everybody. Happens to all of us. That's number one. Admit it. Number two, there are multiple ways to overcome it, right? Study, practice, do 104-foot putts, practice your routine, practice your sales pitch. That's number one. Number two, you could be just do it. Hey, we're going to wing it and let's see, and we'll adjust it on the fly, right? It could be a combination of the two. I'm going to go read and research, write and practice, wing it, adjust it. So that way when I know I get, a lot of times they say practice on the lower client before you get to the big client, right? So now you've messed up on the smaller clients, the smaller prospects. By the time you get to the big client, you've got your speech honed, right? So there are many ways to overcome the imposter syndrome, right? The point is we all get it, and there are ways to overcome it. And sitting there doing nothing or doing the same and expecting a different result, definition of insanity, we know that doesn't work.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
I think preparation is a big one. That if you're prepared, then that's, if you have a plan and you're prepared for it, that's the best position you can put yourself to overcome those jitters. How are you prepared? Practice, right? So that
practice, yeah. Worst case scenario, that was, I forgot, number 4, I said, where they say, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? Am I going to be okay with the worst case scenario? The guy tells me to get the heck out of his office. That's fine. I won't cry. I've got other, prospects I can work with. But you might use it how to turn it around. Well, this is what he tells me, to get the heck out of his office, and I'll have some cool one-liner to turn it all around. Anyway, this is what we do. Dave, you and I want to help business owners overcome their imposter syndrome, right? This is what we do in our group coaching, in our mastermind group. You guys are interested in that. Matt at profitabilitymd.com, Dave at profitabilitymd.com. Help you overcome your imposter syndrome, right? This is also what we do. Our irresistible offer we talk about is we can find any business owner $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 without spending a dollar more on advertising and marketing. That's our irresistible offer. If you want to take advantage of that, Matt at profitabilitymd.com, Dave at profitabilitymd.com. 3 things you need for success, right? You need a commitment, you need a roadmap, you need a support group. Our group coaching, our mastermind group is both the roadmap, because people have done it, we've done it, the people in the group have done it, and the support group, here to help you bounce ideas off, generate ideas, give you the courage to take the action you're supposed to take. We just need your commitment to be successful. You're not going to be successful being imposter syndrome, sitting around doing nothing, sitting around just reading, right? You got to take action. You got to do something. You got to get out of your comfort zone. That's how you overcome the imposter syndrome. We can help you do it. You can do it on your own, but either way, you got to take action to overcome the imposter syndrome. I love this stuff. You love this stuff. ProfitabilityMD.com, our YouTube channel, ProfitabilityMD.com. Obviously, this podcast, Profitability MD, anywhere you find podcasts. Always fun, Dave.
Always fun, Matt. All right. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
All right, buddy. See ya.